Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Forty with another episode of the In Focus podcast, brought to you by the Artist Index and generously sponsored by Heavenly Spirits Importers. And as per usual, we have a special guest. This one is, I think, only our third guest hailing from the other side, Fall River. And more Somerset, I believe. And I will let them introduce themselves and spell their name, and we'll take it from there.
Hi, Chuck Boucher, Chuckboucher.
And your cat just jumped in there.
Oh yeah,
right on cue.
That's why the logo is what it is.
Yep. Even though the audience can't see your cat, it's kind of cool. It's probably a good omen. Chuck, geez, I've known you for a long time, but mostly at a distance. I know you basically through your mom, who worked at the same place that I did, Dartmouth Building Supply, and I know you worked at Riverside Art, and you've got a whole bunch of stories to tell. So whenever you're ready.
It's funny because I was at Dartmouth Building Supply before I was at DBS for a summer, and the position at Riverside Art opened up while I was working there with Joe, and then I was there for 25 years. And if I remember right, you taught classes there for a little while after I did. We started trying to do some classes there, and I did it for a little while, and then you picked up where I left off and did something a little bit different. It was kind of cool though.
Right. Yeah, I did a couple of classes there. Wow. Yeah, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, Riverside tried it for a little while, but it started to feel like a conflict with what we were trying to do as far as selling the supplies. Mm-hmm. If people, trying to sell supplies and do the classes, it felt awkward to sell them the materials or sell the classes, and like the link between the two. We always tried to keep that separate. Mm-hmm. We tried not to step on our customers. Same thing like with the Art Association doing classes. We didn't want to take away from what they were doing. So that was why we stopped doing it. We didn't want to take away from what our customers were doing and try to do it just for whatever reason. So
right. I do remember one gentleman, how could I forget him? I asked him how he was doing, how did he like my class? And he asked me, are we ever going to learn how to draw shoes? And I said, well, drawing shoes is like drawing anything else, but first you got to get the basics down, and once you get those basics, then you can draw shoes to your heart's content. But he was really insistent on learning how to draw shoes. I don't know why I didn't ask.
I remember you come in with a big giant 4-inch brush. And
yeah,
with 4-inch brushes, because the drawing part wasn't important to you. That it was, let's get some color down, let's get some relationships going on, and I really liked that. I thought that was kind of a cool way to approach it. And when I do some classes in my studio now, I always remember that. And I've always felt like drawing and painting are two separate disciplines. So it's like singing and playing the guitar. You do them at the same time, but you learn them separately. And I think drawing and painting is the same kind of thing. And I remember that your approach to do that. And what I do now is when I get a new student, I just have them paint colors and squares. We start with squares, paint every square a different color, but you got to mix the colors. Mm-hmm. and learn how to blend them together. And I don't let them do any images. It's all just geometric shapes for 2 or 3 classes. Sometimes I end up losing students because they think I'm giving them a line of baloney. But the ones that go through that understand later on why I did what I did, and then we can move on. And a lot of times I'm teaching people who really drawing is not their strong point. They want to paint for fun. So we just we just do what it is. We paint whatever the image is that they draw. We don't worry about it's a perfect boat or a perfect tree. We just, this is the best tree that you can draw, and now we're going to paint it in, and we worry about them separately.
Right.
I've always done that, and I like the way that you did that back then. It opened up my eyes a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, a lot of it comes from my instruction at SMU, Southeastern Massachusetts University, and my instructors. They were pretty much disciples of Nicolaides and the natural way to draw. It's just like, when you started off with kindergarten, I mean, they gave you those giant, to a little kid, giant crayons, because your motor skills weren't all that well developed. And so that makes a big difference. That definitely makes a big difference. How did you, I know you were in the Coast Guard. How many years were you in the Coast Guard for?
4 years. That's how I got the money to go to school.
Okay. I'm curious. My brother's a coastie, a lifer, 22 years in with that, and mostly East Coast. His last 18 months, they shipped him out to Bodega Bay, where they shot the Birds, the movie The Birds. That's their claim to fame. So he was on those 47-foot lifeboats, which get rolled around in the surf like somebody trying to flush a water bottle down a toilet.
Yeah, those are the 40, not to correct you, but 44 footers.
44, okay.
That was one of my jobs too. I enjoyed that very, very much. I did that down in Point Judith in Narragansett. I did 41 footers and 44 footers and towed an awful lot of people in. We went out on some rough stuff. It was fun. Yeah. It's much more fun when you're 20 years old than it is at 40 or 50. Let me tell you, it's a different feeling.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, okay, so you went to the Coast Guard. What was your intent, to get the GI Bill to pay for your education? And did you know you wanted to be an artist at that time?
That didn't exist when I went in there. Unfortunately, I went in during the Reagan era, and there were lots of budget cuts. And between 1980 and then the first Gulf War, if you were in there during that time, you had no benefits. Reagan's thought was it's a volunteer service. If you want to come in, it's a job. So I didn't get any medical benefits. I didn't get any GI Bill. I got nothing. All I did is save my money in the bank while I was in there for 4 years and put it aside. Didn't spend anything. That was what.
That's right. Yeah, at that time it wasn't considered a branch of the military.
Well, it never was. It's always was a part of Department of Transportation, Department of Treasury, now Department of Homeland Security, because military can't enforce law on the United States, and the Coast Guard enforces laws. So it can't be part of the Department of Defense because that would be illegal. Mm-hmm. So they find their little loophole around it. It doesn't mean that we're not military. It just means we don't get the same benefits that the military did. And it's changed now with Homeland Security a little bit, but that's kind of what I did, though. I just, I took my little check and I split it in half, and half was to go to school, the other half was to buy a car. And then that's what I did, so got a few grants, the old Pell Grant when it actually had some money in it. And, and the folks at BCC in the financial aid department and at Swain at the financial aid department were outrageously helpful. They understood how badly I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And they worked hard to get me as many grants and loans that I could. And that's what I did. I put myself through.
So, I ask this question all the time. When did you get bit by the bug? When was that aha moment? When was that, damn it, I'm going to be an artist? Because that's all.
I was in the womb.
In the womb.
Yeah. Yeah, I came out with a brush. I don't ever remember a time where I wasn't drawing or painting. It's just always been part of what I was. And my mom pushed it because she wanted to keep me out of trouble. And I say that to this point, it's what I do to stay out of trouble. But she wanted to keep away from some of my friends who had some alternate paths, let's just say. Yeah, and the only thing when I was growing up, the only thing that I could say, no, I'm not going to go do that, was I'm going to go paint. I was respected for painting. So go ahead and paint because everybody wanted to see it, or they wanted a painting. So it was okay for me to go do that rather than saying, hey, I don't want to go break into cars. I'm exaggerating when I say that, but so I'd go home and paint. And it was just my way of literally staying out of trouble with them. When I went into the Coast Guard, I was still painting. I had a small little one of those Mustang 74 Mustang. I set up my trunk like a studio. And when the time was off, when I was on the ship, I would get in my car and I'd go somewhere and paint. I used my steering wheel as an easel. I sat in the car and painted. and never stopped. And I had paintings underneath my rack when I was on the ship, and people just knew what I was doing. And when it came time for me to do, those, what do you want to do with your future? My commanding officers always said, instead of telling me this is what you should do in the Coast Guard, they all said, you need to go to art school. You're in the wrong business. And it was always just a part, like it became who I was all the way through my life. From, I want to say 10 years old is when I really started pushing it, maybe a little younger than that. And I just never stopped. I don't, like I said, I don't ever remember a time something wasn't on the easel. It's just the way that it is.
What school system did you go to?
Fall River.
Fall River.
Yeah.
How was it in elementary and then in high school?
It was tough time, tough time, because of where I grew up. I was judged as a certain type. When they talk about systemic racism, it happens to white kids too. If you have the wrong zip code and you're in a part, like, we didn't have a lot of ethnic issues in Fall River other than being Portuguese, but if you came from a poor part of town, they didn't let you take the college prep classes because they didn't want you to ruin the good kids, so
Were you in what type of heights?
I Pleasant View.
Pleasant View. They wouldn't let you
join the band or the art clubs or any of those things. So I just kept to myself, and I did an awful lot of reading. I did an awful lot of painting, and I satisfied my curiosity in my own way. Mm-hmm. Then eventually I went into the Coast Guard at 17 years old and just moved on from there.
How was Durfee for? I just remember now. We had one was a transplant. So 1, 2, 3. So yeah, you're the fourth or fifth person from Fall River. But one of the guests on this show, Bob Deck, his mother and father owned Loretta's Variety on Rock Street. He went to Durfee, and he said the art program at that time was pretty horrible. It was like, the elementary program in the high school. It was, there was no real instruction. It was more like a study hall with crayons, if I remember right.
Yeah, when I was at Durfee, the art program actually was in the basement of the old tech building. There were 3 classes in one room, so it was really noisy. There were not a lot of materials, and the teachers were very, very talented, but they sat at their drawing table and did their own work while the students did what they were doing, and they didn't pay a whole lot of attention to what was going on. And then, as we come down close to the senior year, one of the teachers came to me and said, why did you ever try to go to art school? Your stuff's pretty good. I said, it was really, Durfee was just a really bad experience. I took a test at one point, and the guidance counselor even said, how did you score so high on your reading lists? Nobody scores as high as you did. I said, I read all the time. Those tests were easy. He said, how much do you read? I said, probably 100 books a year. He said, you're full of crap. I said, I'm not full of crap. Why would I lie to you? Look at the test.
Yeah. So you said you read like 100 books a year. Your instructor had some doubts about that, but that also reminded me, you're also a published author, correct?
Yeah, I've done 3 books. The last one I did, Make Fast the Bitter End, is based on the stuff that I did when I was in the Coast Guard and based on the people that I was stationed with. Although it's not, the characters are not real. I did characterizations of people. That's not a biography in any means. It was just inspired by the events that I did.
Now, were you on a barb at one time?
On a what, please?
No, it wasn't the barb. What was the name of your vessel?
Oh, the Cape Horn.
The Cape Horn. Now, you guys were involved in some almost historic adventure, right?
Oh yeah. That's part of what the book is about, to tell the story of what we felt that day. It was a pretty impressive storm. It was similar to the perfect storm, believe it or not, except we came back. They didn't really expect us to. They were sending out search boats in preparation to look for us. We're on the backside of Cape Cod, and we were in 30 to 40 foot waves in the middle of winter. It was exciting. When you're 20 years old, it was a blast. We had a good time. I didn't know how dangerous it was until years later.
Yeah.
So I was reading a book of some of the greatest rescues in Coast Guard history. I get to page 78. They start talking about us. It kind of blew my mind. Like, where'd this come from?
Yeah.
It was kind of fun. So yeah, it was a thing. I look at that point as probably one of the days that I found a certain amount of self-respect in myself with all of the crap that I went through. Well, I started believing everything that was in high school, all the bad stuff, that I was this, that I was that. That day in the Coast Guard, I come out of that, and there were half a dozen people who were alive because of the things that we did. They certainly would have died, not even including us. That wasn't even in my head. But I recognized that I made a difference that day, and that was the seed of everything that came after that, was that day. So
it's kind of amazing how people, react to you based on your zip code or your address. You're not in what they used to call the Tony part of town. Tony meaning the really, like Upper Highlands, that kind of thing.
Right.
And the Coast Guard experiences, my brother said, he realized he's a little crazy, because the worse it got out there, the more alive he felt. It was, it just bring it on. And so, the Coasties are just this group that are just so, I don't think they get enough respect as well. So you chose a service that was also had its issues. Now, did any of those feelings, those episodes in your life, were they ever brought into your work?
Not into my painting, into my writing. Mm-hmm. The writing is therapeutic, and the painting is more exploratory. The writing looks backwards and the painting looks forward. It's always been that way for me. The painting is about promise and what might come, and learning and growing and experimenting, and the writing just gets the demons out. So it's a two-edged thing.
Okay. How now your painting changed quite a bit. Your earlier works that I remember seeing were more they were more there was a lot of curvature to them. They were more fantastic, using that term, that they weren't real, photographic reality.
Yeah, they were very much expressions. It's funny because every single painting comes out of the one just before it, and I see a direct line, even from the landscapes I'm doing now all the way back to the Cubist experiments that I was doing when I was 25 years old. There's a direct line. If you take all the paintings and line them up, you'll see that they're the same paintings. I use the same palette that I did when I was at Swain. It's almost 40 years old, this palette. It's got pieces of every painting they ever worked on. It's like my talisman. But what happens is I see something in the painting and I change it in the next one. So from painting a figure inside of a house at the dining room table, there's a window behind it. And eventually the window became important, and what's outside of the window became important. Then I started doing cityscapes. And then I started looking at coming back from the wideness. My focus narrowed to people in the street. And instead of people at the dinner table, there were people in the crosswalk. And it took a while for that transition. And then up until about probably 2010, I was doing some massive, large city paintings with crowds of people. I would call them peoplescapes, and it wasn't about any one of those people. I was doing like outside of Fenway Park. I was out doing the Boston Marathon. I was there the day that the bomb went off, and I was doing sketches and photographs of the area. So I did a painting of being there, and that was almost like the last of that series of paintings, because at the same time, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer just around the same time that I was at the Boston Marathon. And my focus kind of got shifted. It was like, they weren't really a traumatic event, but they made me question mortality, for lack of a better word. And it was all of a sudden really, really hard to focus on the painting that was experimental, that was like the selfish side of painting, that only made me happy to whether or not somebody else liked it or not. It was just, I'm going to do this. And I couldn't focus anymore because I felt like I was doing a selfish thing, and then I had to worry about my wife. At the same time, I opened up the studio that I'm currently in at the Narrow Center with my wife's extreme encouragement. And I sat in that studio and unable to for the first time in my life, put the brush on the canvas. And then I started doing small paintings, 8x10, 9x12 landscape paintings, and found that to be therapeutic. It was relaxing to me. It was opening up a new light to me. And that took on a whole nother path So where I was doing the peoplescapes, I went back to the landscapes, and I've been following that path now for about 8 years. Yeah, so I I started exploring that in different ways, and again going back to what we talked about earlier with you and your big bold brush and the color. Color became really important to me through the landscapes, and how to make things that I've been seeing and doing in the peoplescapes. How do I bring that into the landscapes? The small where there'd be a fleck of color where somebody's hand used to be. How do I do that in a big giant landscape? A fleck of light over somebody's eyebrow. How do I do that in a landscape? So it took me a little while, but eventually I got to where I was doing 3 by 5 foot landscape paintings, and all of that stuff started to fall into place. And then COVID hit, and everybody wasn't going anywhere for a little while. And I live at the top of Mount Hope Bay, and I started painting the views that I get at the end of the day on Mount Hope Bay, looking toward the south with sunset or the middle of the day and the clouds that build up. And there was no subject except the light. That was it. And I focused on the light, and I did about 38 paintings, maybe 40 paintings of the light looking south on Mount Hope Bay in about, I want to say just about a year's worth of time. And so the paintings of the bay, they range from 12 by 24 inches up to 3 by 5 feet again. And I just had a blast, and I got really absorbed into all of that. And I followed that path for the first time in my whole life. I think I followed that to a logical conclusion. And I'm in a place where I'm at the old fork in the road, and I'm looking at a couple of choices. Part of me wants to go back and do figure stuff. Part of me wants to go back into the woods and paint the trees. Anyway, so I did the paintings ranging from 12 by 24 to 3 by 5 feet, and followed that to what I think is the first time ever where I followed it to the end of the road. I find a crossroads here. It's where I'm going to go, and I may go back and do some figure painting, go back into the woods and do some trees again. Certainly not going to paint the sky at this point. Just I don't know. It's just a different path right now, and it's intimidating and exciting for the first time because
you seem very analytical, very intellectual, believe it or not, in your approach to things. I mean, when you were talking about that line running through all of your work, going back over the years, all I could think of is like one of those camera shots where they start off at one point, and it as you were speaking, that camera now goes over the shoulder of the sitter to the window in the backyard, facing the backyard, into the backyard, and then it follows somebody down the street into another house, and it's kind of exciting.
It's exactly what I did. I said to Don Wilkinson at one point, to me, for me, my painting is where science and emotion come together. I'll let my heart do its thing, and then I go back and I correct it with the science part of what I do and analyze it and figure out every little brushstroke. Then I go back and say, wait a minute, and I put the emotion back into it. And there's that battle that goes back and forth to me that's really kind of exciting.
Have you heard of Bruce Lee's "Be Like Water"?
No.
You got to Google that, okay? Because he talks about the intellectual, the emotion, and the intellect. I believe that's like the yin and yang. That if you're too emotional, then you lose. Then you have no mechanics. You have no intellect. You have no structure.
Right.
And if you're structured or intellectual, or you just worry about the craft, then you have no emotion. So you have to have a balance of those things. And his thing is like, be like water, just let it flow. Try to find that harmony between those two things, which is kind of an interesting concept. I've latched onto it for a while.
Yeah, I've never heard that, but that's really kind of what I do when it comes to my painting. That's the place where I used to say when I was younger, when I'm painting, I can be God and nobody can stop me. And then, I can make people do what I want them to do. And same thing in my writing. I'm in full control with what's going on there. But then if I let go of that control a little bit, let my heart get in there, then I'm surprised. Like when I start writing, I never know what the end of the story is going to be. It's a blast. I don't sit there and plot it all out. I just let that just be free flowing. And I like to write about the characters and the people. And I just go for it and let it happen. It's a blast. And then you go back and you do your technical stuff. You make sure everything's spelled right. You make sure your punctuation's right, and you get off on that in a different way. And that's kind of what I do with the painting is I let it go, and then I go back and do the punctuation. I make sure that the spatial relationships are correct. Make sure that the brush stroke's not too big. Make sure the color relationships are balanced. Make sure that the color relationships create space, don't destroy space, or sometimes destroy space if I wanted to do that. So,
have you ever been, I'll to use for lack of a better word, accused of being an overthinker?
Oh yeah,
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. So what?
Yeah.
So what? That's the way I look at it. I overthink things, but it doesn't mean that I'm not afraid to let go sometimes either. But that's how I don't get. I untangle the knots. I sit in front of the paint. Sometimes I'll stare at oh, here we go again.
No. This is crazy because there's a couple of things like again, I've known you, but I don't know you, and now I'm really getting to know you. And one of those things is like I've always said, I don't like puzzles. My ex-wife could sit and do a 5,000 piece puzzle and go. It would drive me insane. But one of the things I do like doing is untangling string. Give me a box of tangled up, string.
Oh, that makes no.
Without cutting it. I love following the line and seeing how it got tangled in the first place.
Yeah, give me a lighter. I'll take care of the string.
Sounds like it must be a Coast Guard thing. Give me a gallon of gas and a flare.
Yeah, get rid of that. No, I don't know. I don't like the puzzle part. I like to create my own puzzle. Yeah. I don't like to do somebody else. I don't want to clean up somebody else's mess. I clean up my own.
Yeah. The weird thing is the string thing comes from a maritime gene. My first great grandfather, 12 generations back, when they came to Quebec in 1654, his son was a mariner, and he was supposedly it's been all documented, which is really wonderful. He was a real freak about tidy deck lines and so on and so forth. And the irony of his death is that he got his foot fouled in the anchor line and went to the bottom of the St. Lawrence River. And when they were doing the reenactment on Canadian television, I saw the line playing out. It was like, how my abstracts were a lot of scribble work and, sgraffito and such. And it was like, oh my God,
Yeah. And it's funny. I was just going to say that when you take the maritime and cleaning up the lines, because I was just going to say it's a safety issue.
Yeah.
You get your life in your hands. Yeah. I got caught in between a tow line and the rail one day, and that thing was squeezing me, and the guy was getting about, pardon me. One of my buddies grabbed an axe, was about to hit the axe to chop the tow line so that I didn't get cut in half. And then the boat swerved the other way and caught my breath and laughed about it. But it was to be put very early on. That was one of my first trips out. Be aware of where the line is, make sure it's what it's supposed to be doing. It was a wake up call, and it never happened again.
Speaking of lines, let's talk about a tightrope, because it really does seem like you're on that tightrope between your brain and your heart.
Oh yeah. All the time. I mean, and life gets in the way, so there's always something going on in your life. And for me, the art is the escape from that. And either one wants to take up all of me. So I walk down that line all the time. Do I paint, or do I go take care of my mom? Do I paint, or I go get groceries? Do I paint, or whatever else is going on? It's always there. And then within the artwork, what am I going to do with my brush today? And there's always that, is today going to be an emotional day? Is today going to be a scientific day? And I go back and forth with that. It's just the way that I work.
Yeah. Let's roll it back to Swain School. How did you come about to go there?
I was at BCC when I was in the Coast Guard. I knew I wanted to go to school. I just didn't know where to go, and I didn't have any guidance when I was in high school or anything. But I had a friend of mine who said, there was a decent program at BCC to give you a jump start, and from there you could go wherever you wanted to go. So I got in there on my freshman year, and I met Marion Wilner and Ron Lister. Ron had just started teaching. Marion had been there for a little while. And for whatever reason, with Marion Wilner, she and I clicked real early on. Marion Wilner being on the board of directors and had me going back and forth while a student at BCC. I was taking classes at Swain School at the same time, because they had that program where you could do that. And I met Sig Haynes there, and it's in my sophomore year. And there was something about his demeanor and the way that the students were that decided I was able to transfer there as a junior painter. But I looked at the people around me, and I had some catching up to do, because their drawing classes were 8 hours long, and BCC was an hour and a half. And so I had 2 years of catching up to do on my junior year. So I just got in there and I really, really busted my hump. And while I was doing that, I earned the respect of the teachers there and the other students there at the same time because of the amount of effort that I was putting in. And it's always been that I get something back because of my painting. And Swain was able to do that for me in ways I never really expected. And I met some really important people, Sig Haynes, obviously, and Ben Martinez and David Smith. I think I lost you again. I don't know.
No, you
Oh,
didn't.
okay.
Let me ask you about Sig. Do you think, you talk about this color palette that goes back all these years. Is there like a parallel or
Well,
a point
yes.
of departure from?
Sig taught me how to find color in life, how to look for color. Go outside and look at the trees. And for the first time, I saw reds in the trees in the middle of the wintertime, and I just saw color in a different way. And then he introduced me to some books about color theory that showed me the science of color, which opened up the world to me because there was that connection now, science and all of that stuff. So that was just extraordinary for me. And Ben Martinez taught me that painting was work. Like if we had an assignment where he said, I need 15 paintings by Friday. I told him I had to work at my gas station job, and he said, you need to decide what you want to do. He said, if you work at the gas station, I'll respect you for that because we do have to eat. He said, but if you want to be a painter, you need to get the 15 paintings done. He said, whichever decision you want to make, you decide which one you want to do. So I found a way to get those 15 paintings done in the end of the week. And talked to my boss at the gas station, and I told them very clearly, the gas station was second, school was first. And I never looked back as far as that's concerned. That then opened up my eyes. It's not art play, it's artwork. And I worked hard at it. And then David Smith, to me, taught me how to think like an artist. Not so much how to paint. I think that the earlier two teachers taught me the technical parts of painting. David taught me how to think and explore within my own self and put it on a canvas in a way that no one else ever did. And then during that time, I met people like Jim Charette. I met Jim in 1982 with Dave Aguiar, who works at Riverside Art now. And we connected in 1982, the three of us, and we're still friends now, all these years later. And I ran into all of my Swain friends, Steve Remick and people that the way the Swain community is, we see each other at the shows and openings and connect. And it's a beautiful thing. I think the Swain community as it goes on now is kind of unique. And I always feel comfortable when I go to an opening of Swain people. It feels like all old friends are there. It's really kind of cool.
Yeah. The legacy that Swain has created has had a lasting impact. I'm almost wondering what happens as the last generation, we start getting to the last generation of graduates. What's going to happen?
What's going to happen? Yeah.
Yeah.
I
UMass.
wonder about that. But although with the UMass school right there in the middle, I think it'll continue, but in a different way. I think it'll still continue because artists they stay around and they do what they're doing. We stayed around, they'll stay around, and they'll continue what they're doing. I think they'll build on our legacy in a direction that we just don't see. I think it'll be a little different, but I think there are some of the students now that I see that have come into the Narrow Center, and I've connected with them, and they're at UMass right now. They were Swain, UMass students and BCC students have gone on. And I'm looking at the promise that's in there, and some of the teachers that are at BCC right now that I follow and I'm connected with, like Cat Nuts and stuff that they do. I think that they're going to push this in a direction maybe even more than we ever thought. Because the generation of teachers that are in the area right now are building on what we did, and it's still growing. And I don't see it stopping. I think it's going to keep on going. I think the whole world is in a evolutionary time, and it shows up in small little ways in our own communities and our own little lifestyles. And I think it's all changing. And part of me is glad I won't see it, and part of me wishes I did.
Do you think it's a phenomena right now that there are so many artists? It seems like everywhere you can't go for a walk without stepping on one.
I had a discussion a couple of weeks ago there's a group in Fall River that's trying to promote the arts and make arts as a vital part of what it can be in Fall River, similar to what's going on in New Bedford. And the woman said to me that they feel like Fall River is where New Bedford was 5 years ago. I said, Fall River is where New Bedford was 40 years ago because of what's happened with Swain and what's going on. When I was younger, the artwork was an escape. I had to get out of Fall River, right? You got to get out. It's going to get me out of here. And I think that what happens is that a lot of the motivation for artists comes out of hard times. And I think that the basis for a lot of artists comes out of hard times, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's acting. It's an escape from something, whether it's from getting out of your hometown and going off to see the world. I kind of think that it's an escape from something internal. And if you can find what you're running from inside of yourself, you don't necessarily need to leave your hometown. You find your way out of that dilemma that's inside of your heart, that's inside of your emotion. I think society as a whole is going through a difficult time. So the foundation of people trying to escape something is more than ever. And I also think that because of the generation that we were, where there's so many artists in our generation, it makes it okay for that younger generation to explore those paths. The opportunity at BCC is better than it ever was. UMass is better than it ever was. RISD is as good as it's ever been. So there's a lot of local places, a lot of places for these people, and it's okay. And places like the Narrows that make it okay, they place to show your work. There's a new Fall River Art Museum that just started in the last year. Gallery X has been around for a long time, and the New Bedford Art Museum, and then the galleries like Judith Klein is there. So anyway, I just think that the opportunity to show and be accepted and be seen is greater than it was before. So that makes it okay to be an artist. So I just think that when I was 10 years old, my mom wanted me to get real art supplies. She said she wanted to encourage me. So she took me down to Riverside Art, and Bob LeCompte's dad, Bob LeCompte Sr. was there. This is back in like 1970, 1971. And he said, "So you want to be an artist when you grow up?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And I was real intimidated. All these materials, a big giant real art store. So he said, "Do you draw a lot?" I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Do you want to paint?" He said, "Yeah, I do." He said, I think you already are an artist." And that just like, it boosted me. And I think that kind of acceptance, which didn't happen in school then, is happening now. Like in Somerset, Steve Meehan teaches the kids in Somerset. He's a great UMass graduate, great painter. And he pushes his kids, he encourages his kids, and they're going on to some really nice things, onto UMass and other places. Though I think those things are just the stuff that happened in the 70s and 80s that you and I experienced. We were the seeds, and we became the trees. And now the trees that we are dropping our seeds in this community at a greater rate than was dropped in the 70s. And I think that it's just going to keep on growing. I just think we are ripe to have a real nice, fertile art community. I really do.
Yeah. It's funny because I mean, the first question in most parents when they find out that their child wants to be an artist is, how are you going to make a living? How are you going to survive? How are you going to pay the bills? And it seems like there's just a whole bunch of people who are just making it work regardless, and even to the point where they can afford a small studio space.
Yeah. When somebody asks me that, I said, well, it depends on what kind of art you do, really. I mean, if you want to be a painter, then you think that it's going to be a selfish thing and it's going to take you a long time to figure out how to make money as a painter. But if you want to be a graphic designer, there's a business there. If you want to be an illustrator, there's a business there. You got to be really, really good. It's like being a musician. You have to be really, really good, and you have to be committed to it. And you have to be able to sacrifice if you want to make a living at it, but you can. But it's not easy. But I don't think there's a whole lot of things in the arts at all that people do primarily for the money. Primarily.
Well, I was just going to ask you. I mean, have you ever had to do what they call for market, or what they refer to when I was in school as bread and butter? In other words, you're doing, you're an abstract painter, but people like your landscapes, so you do the landscapes because that's what pays the bills. But you do the abstracts for yourself. Have you ever been in that situation?
No. See, when I was in Swain, and between my junior and senior year, I had an opportunity to intern at a place as an illustrator, commercial illustrator, for a little while. Watch these guys work on these drawings and paintings for hours and hours, sometimes weeks, and then the artwork would go upstairs, and someone would approve or disapprove of it and say, change it to blue or change it to red. I didn't like that. And then their name would go on it. And sometimes the painting was horrible after the changes, and their name still went on it. And I said, I never wanted to do that again. So I made sure that my major was in painting, and I decided I was going to do my artwork only for me. And I've never made any decisions in my artwork based on whether or not I thought it was going to make me money. I was lucky enough to get a job at Riverside Art where I was involved in the field, talking to artists all over the place. I was able to learn, go to shows, do all of that, maintain contact with people, and I kept learning from that direction. But even though my landscapes tend to be more commercial, there wasn't money that made me go in that direction. It was, like I said, the fact that my wife and my life just all of a sudden came to a screeching halt, and I had to reassess everything. And it was an emotional decision. Like, this makes me feel good, and nothing to do with the money, although that helps. And I think more, my paintings sell more now, not because of what I'm painting, but because where I'm at. Because even my more abstracted figure paintings at the Narrows, people were able to see it. And because the Narrows has people that come from all over the country to see that music. And I get to meet people from all walks of life. Some of them have tons and tons of money, and looking at the painting is a drop in a hat. I've had people come in and spend tens of thousands of dollars in my studio from the Narrows. And it surprises me sometimes the stuff that they buy. And I just paint what I like.
So, okay. So the Narrows, I mean, that was a leap of faith. You had to pay a rent there, but it worked out for you.
That was my wife's leap of faith. I was terrified, but she felt like, I had just left my job 2 years earlier from Riverside Art for a number of reasons. And there's no hard feelings there. It was understandable. But after a little over 25 years, but she said, you've been working for other people your whole life. It's time to do what you know for yourself.
So this is what you do now.
I'm sorry?
This is what you do. You're a working
That's
painter.
That's my primary job now. Yeah. I walked into the Narrows one day. I talked to Pat Norton, and he said, we really like your work. We'd like to have you here. I put everything into the studio, and about a week into the first week there, I sold the painting, and it covered that first month's rent. And about 2 weeks after that, I sold another one, and I had 2 months rent covered. And I was smiling. I said, well, I know I'm going to be here for the next 8 weeks. Let me do a great big painting while I got the time. And I sold a couple more and a couple more, and I never not made enough to pay the rent. And there are times I've made much more than that. So it's nice. It's nice.
Let me go back. Where was this place that you were doing the commercial art for? The illustrator?
It was for a Navy contractor in Newport that no longer exists. Okay. But there were some very, very skilled people there. It was, I mean, they were hardcore illustrators. They were illustrating the Navy warships and the missiles and the submarines and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And
the reason why I asked is because I've got he's passed away a couple of years ago. Milt Healy. He was the gentleman who did the murals in Whites of Westport. Of the Priscilla. The Age of Steam and so on and so forth. The Fall River Line. We're gonna wrap this up. So where are you gonna go now? Where is Chuck Boucher going to go now with his artwork?
I'm gonna let my heart decide. I'm letting go a little bit. I have a couple of ideas for the next couple of paintings, but I don't know long term right now, and that's kind of exciting. I feel like I'm standing right at that crossroads right now. I want to play. I feel like at the point in my life, I don't want to sound like arrogant, but it's time to just show off and just paint what I know instead of growing anymore. I paint what I know, let people see it. Either they like it or they don't. Paint what makes me feel good at this point. And that's the idea. I don't need to experiment anymore. I don't need to develop something anymore. That'll happen organically, but that's not going to be my primary focus. I'm not going to see what happens if I try this color blue instead of that color blue. I got these two blues on my palette. I know what they do. I'm going to make them sing now. I know how to get what I want. I know how to get the colors I want with the 15 colors that are on my palette. I can get anything I want out of that. And I'm just gonna play. I'm gonna have a good time.
All right. So I want to ask you, to close this out. If you could go back in time and talk to one person from your life for 1 hour, who would that person be? Why would you want to speak with them, and what would you speak with them about?
I don't know. I mean, I would love to see my grandmother. She died in 95. I think she'd be happy to see where I am. Part of me would really like to see my brother. He died when I was 9. Find myself often wondering what might have been. He was 3 years old. He was very sick. I wonder what it would have liked to go through my life having a brother, and what would it be like now having a brother. Although I have some brother-in-laws that I'm really close to. That's kind of nice, but yeah, I can't help but wonder. It would be nice to have a conversation with him.
Mm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
before I
And
don't
all right, so
stop.
one more question. Have you ever sold a painting, that the person told you that buying that painting was life-changing for them, or it was very, very significant?
Oh
It
yeah,
wasn't just something that matched a couch.
no, that happens a lot. Because my paintings are so personal, that's usually why people buy it, because there's this really strong connection to it. I had a woman come in the other day into the studio who bought a painting 5 years ago, and she had to come down to tell me thank you. She said, I just love it. She said it's in my room, and the conversations that my family and I have because of that painting, and why did I buy that painting? She said, I just felt so attached to it. And that was just the most recent one, but that happens to me often. It's kind of cool. That makes me feel good, because that's where those paintings come from.
All right. All right. Well, Chuck, thank you so much. At some point, you'll probably be on another podcast with Don Wilkinson, who we've been trying to launch Push and Pull, which is the name of his podcast. It's for the Artist Index. But, with the pandemic and all kinds of craziness going on in the world, it just gets it's a little hard for people to schedule and get things going. Chuck, thank you so much. And thanks for putting up with the technical difficulties.
I'm sorry. I don't know if it's coming from me or just crappy luck, but I'm sorry.
No, and I am going to make a physical visit. I am going to show up at your studio and check it out. Again, as the life of the artist is, we spend so much time marketing and promoting and doing all kinds of other stuff, and sometimes we actually get a chance to paint, and then it leaves a little very, very little room for going out and commiserating.
I understand that. Just in the back of your head, you'll see me post it later on. But the Saturday after Thanksgiving, the Narrows is having a complete open house for the artists on the second floor. So if that works for you, I'll certainly be there on that day. But any other time you want to come in, just let me know, and I just open the door for you. It's not
all right.
Even Monday afternoon. You and your wife can come by. I'll bring my wife with me, and we'll do something.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to take it out. And folks, thank you so much for joining us with artist Chuck Boucher. And this is the In Focus podcast, brought to you by the Artist Index and sponsored by Heavenly Spirits Importers. And until the next time, it's not getting any better. It's not getting any worse out there. It's a wait and see. So with that in mind, till the next time, thanks so much. And keep your ears on for us. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.